it had a cost, because it meant that a lot of my energy was spent thinking about things which were actually not spiritual at all, to acquire things which I didn't really need. So this week I wanted to refer back to the Karanya Metta Sutta, so the Sutta of loving kindness, and see what it says about what we're required to actually follow that path. Some of the basic human qualities we need to follow this way of metta. And what I'm going to do is just read a sentence and then just break it down a little, and I'll do that for about 3 sentences just at the beginning of the sutta. So firstly, it says that we should be able upright, perfectly upright, of noble speech, gentle and humble. And so to break that down a little bit, if we start with the first statement, that we should be able. And I suppose we need to be able human beings, in that we first of all, I suppose, need to have a sense that the path, the way of metta, is the way we want to go, that it has value and worth to us. And secondly, we need to be able or capable of actually making commitments and following them through in order to make progress along the path. And then it says we should be upright, and the Pali word it translates from is uju, and that means straight, and with respect to, if you like, a Fletcher and his arrows, making the arrows straight. So it's quite a nice translation in a way, in that, straight is quite a nice translation of that word. So we need to be straight. So we need to be straight with our dealings with others. We need to be honest and open. And we need to look at, that's quite difficult, isn't it? Because we need to look at to what extent our actions with others are guided by our own interests, or whether they're actually, they're influenced more by how they affect other people. So it goes on after saying upright that we need to be perfectly upright, and it's emphasising the word upright or the word straight, and it's as if it's saying, are you sure? To what extent are your actions governed governed by selfless motives? So that's the next section of that sentence. And then it goes on to say that we should, the person who follows the way of metta should be of noble speech. So noble is not a word we use very often, but it's something that we recognise. So we must communicate truthfully. We must communicate in a kindly way, in consideration of the people we're speaking to. And we shouldn't gossip or spread disharmony. So someone who speaks in that way, who has those qualities, is said to speak nobly. And then lastly, in that sentence I read out, it says that we should be gentle and humble. And that's not meant that we should be sort of subservient and to give in to people. It's more that we need to be more sort of flexible and amenable to people that we're dealing with. So we need to be prepared to listen to other people's views if they don't agree with ours, and consider them on their merits, and not just to try to enforce our way. So it's really saying we shouldn't be conceited. So then, and the next sentence I'm going to read out has implications on the way, perhaps the way of our lifestyle, the way our lifestyle is. So it says, contented, easily supported, with few duties, of light livelihood, with senses calmed, discreet, not impudent, not greedily attached to families. So that's quite a long sentence, isn't it? So start with contentment. And, we need to be content within ourselves. If we're going to stick to the path, we need to not be hankering after things all the time, not trying to fix things around us in a way that suits us all the time, and be discontent when that doesn't quite work out. We need to be able to basically be accepting and appreciative of what's around us. And then it talks about being easily supported. So when the sutta was written, or at the time of the Buddha at least, this referred to the monks in relation to the laity. So the monks were entirely dependent on the laity for their upkeep, and while they recited and learned the teachings of the Buddha, when they reflected and meditated and taught themselves, they weren't able to take part in the if you like, the economy of the day, which was very vigorous and required a lot of labour. It's very agricultural, and they couldn't do both those things at the same time. So the onus was on them then to require as little as possible of the laity, so that they could easily support them without too much effort. And that seemed to, that seemed to be a sort of win-win situation, in that they got to do their spiritual training, and the laity felt that they earned merit in supporting them in doing that. So what does that mean today? So how are we easily supported today? And perhaps when we think about, when we look at the trucks going into the supermarkets and consider where all the food that in those lorries has come from, and all the countries they've come from, and when we buy our clothes, what all the different countries that the various garments are made in, our sort of consumer society, if you like, is one which has a great support network, much of which we don't see. But we're sort of aware that in some instances our things that we use exploit other people and exploit our environment. And so the onus on us probably is to be a bit more sparing in the way that we use goods, and more discriminating in our needs. So to use things perhaps which are more comfortable, that we know the source of them, and that they are less harmful than other things. And lastly, in terms of, if you like, work, in relation to work, we need to work mostly. Very few of us can actually devote our lives to the spiritual path. And work is, it's often a very healthy activity. It provides us feedback, it makes us feel worthwhile. But we need to make sure that we don't overwork, to work too much, so that, to the detriment of our goal, so that we are unable to be reflective and meditative and to learn, study the Dharma. So that's some things which come under the heading of easily supported. And then it says, with senses calmed. So in Buddhism, you probably know that it considers us to have 6 senses, the mind being the 6th sense. And it's our minds which, tell us about the world. It's our minds which present the world to us. And so we need to develop a practical wisdom, a discerning mind, that can distinguish those things that lead to contentment and away from discontentment. So if you like, the skillful versus the unskillful, so that we can manage our karma skillfully. Our karma is our actions, and our actions have consequences. And then lastly, in that sentence, it mentions being discreet, not impudent, not greedily attached to families. It's quite a mouthful there. What it's said to refer to is the Buddha's advice to the monks not to become dependent on particular families for their food, and not to ingratiate themselves to those families because they particularly like the way, their quantities or the quality of the food they get there, and not to be, therefore, to be, in a sense, beholden to them, because it detracts from their practice. And similarly to today, we could say that, perhaps we want to be careful about the way we attach to other groups and institutions in ways which perhaps our work, we relate in a way to work which is convenient, makes us feel acknowledged in the work and get away with work, but it's perhaps not conducive to our spiritual aims. And then the last sentence I wanted to read was, he should not pursue the slightest thing for which other wise men might censure him. So here, it talks about our relationship with other people on the spiritual path, where obviously we need to relate to other people on the spiritual path, and they can provide feedback to us. Sometimes it's difficult for us to see whether we're making the right decisions or whether we're ignoring some things which we should be doing. And our spiritual friends in the spiritual community can help us make the right decisions. And in order to accept the help of other people, we need to have relationships with them. We need to respect them in order to take on their advice when perhaps we need it. So lastly, I just wanted to perhaps reflect some of those ideas with respect to the 5 precepts. So the 5 ethical guidelines that Buddhists follow. And perhaps to see how they provide the ethical foundation of metta. So we might say, with deeds of loving kindness, we can hold our appreciation for the wholeness of others, their strengths and their weaknesses. With open-handed generosity, we can give what we're able to, our wisdom, our time and our energy. And with stillness, simplicity and contentment, we can take what we need and be appreciative and grateful for what we have. With truthful communication, we can bring harmony. And with mindfulness clear and radiant, we can discern and follow those acts which are skillful.
Yes, thanks Anna. I just find it such a fascinating mix of qualities. We have able, upright, contented, not impudent, and it almost sounds as if the Buddha is saying we can't practice metta unless we're contented or upright and noble speech. It's quite a high bar, isn't it? And I was thinking that it's almost like actually maybe it goes 2 ways. That maybe through practicing metta, we can cultivate these qualities too. At the same time, it's good to be aware that these are the qualities that go with metta. I
suppose one thing that we need to consider also is in terms of metta and some of these things is we need to practice it to ourselves, don't we?
Yes.
Because it can, as you say, some of the words seem a little bit demanding, yes. and sometimes we might slip from those those aims, and so we need to allow ourselves to make mistakes and to be aware of them and to try and improve.
Yeah, because it can be quite daunting reading that. Even though, the meaning of the word karaniya is let him or them do, which is like an invitation. And so these are invitations to develop these qualities, you could say, or aspirations. But, we mustn't get discouraged. Because when I first heard, let them be contented, I was thinking, well, that's a very high bar, contentment. I think only a Buddha would be completely content. To me, it's a very high quality to be content, not restless, not anxious, to be very, I think I personally have some contentment, but I don't know, that complete contentment or the uju, upright, perfectly upright.
Yeah.
That's really quite daunting. That's quite high.
I mean, you mentioned, you said, let them be. I really love that.
Yes.
that it's like an invitation, isn't it?
That's right. Not a commandment.
Not a commandment. Yeah. And it's sort of forgiving in a way. I find that is, and sort of leading you in.
Yes.
And it sort of suggests to me that there's a little bit of leeway there or tolerance, and that we need to, metta needs to surround our approach when we're considering these things. We need to have that in mind.
Yeah. And I like the juxtaposition of upright. So upright kind of means straight talking, actually. Being very direct and not mincing one's words, not being afraid to offend someone if we see something that's true. But then with that is noble speech. So we also, you know, so there has to be a balance.
Balance, yeah.
You know, I'm sure we all know really upright, straight-talking people, and I can really appreciate it. But it's, you know, I think when we're really straight-talking, we really have to bear in mind the person we're talking to and whether it's the right time or kindly. You know.
See, upright's a strange. It's a not an oftenly used word, is it?
It's almost old-fashioned.
It is old, and it's sort of, and when you said these words, and there's quite a lot it's sort of demanding. It's also a bit clunky. It sounds a bit clunky, and it takes some sort of translations of sort of more contemporary terms to try and make it have meaning, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing you mentioned also, the contentment. I found that when I was reading it, that was the thing which I found to be most sort of challenging in a way.
Me too.
Because you said the same thing, didn't you? But I was thinking, because I was looking at the near enemy of contentment is complacency, isn't it?
Yes.
And I thought that was interesting, because you can sort of just relax into something, drop your effort, and just be self-satisfied, and think that's contentment.
Yeah.
And I think that's perhaps where, the words of the wise might be useful, to help us.
Yeah. What is true contentment? And the Buddha, one of his beautiful qualities was he was beautifully content. And he was challenged by a king about, I bet I'm more content with you. I've got 50 wives, all these palaces. And the Buddha said, well, if you, could you sit and do nothing for an hour and be content? Yeah, that's easy. He said, what about a day? No. And the Buddha said, well, I could just sit here doing nothing, having no entertainment or stimulus, and be completely, perfectly content for days or weeks at a time. I think that's quite a high bar.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I think it's funny because I have sort of two things going on in my mind when I hear that.
Yeah.
And one is, that sounds admirable, and the other one is, well, you should be doing something. There should be something. There should be something going on. So I love. That's what I love often about the suttas, the teachings, is just that at first there's something that sort of teases you into thinking about it a bit more. Yes. And then when you and it sort of leads you into sort of studying it, which is really lovely, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the Buddha, sitting there being a Buddha was just amazing. It would just have such an effect on people. So it wasn't like anybody just sitting around doing nothing. It was, but this, I think we just have to intuit what he meant. I mean, I think another area of what you brought out about senses calmed, I think people can misinterpret Buddhism as meaning we have to be automatons and not feel anything. And in a way, it's just the opposite. I think if we drop the grasping, that comes in through the sense, really pleasurable taste or beautiful view, if we just drop this hankering or he talks about hankering after families or greedy. If we drop the greed that comes through with, pleasure coming in through the senses, then we just really purely experience, what's coming in through the senses. So life is much richer and vibrant.
In fact, we're encouraged to bring our awareness to things, aren't we? And there's nothing wrong with bringing our awareness there's something very lovely about bringing our awareness and deriving pleasure and sort of joy from our surroundings or our experiences.
It's the grasping that, it's addressing.
It's the trying to make it make things the way you want them to be, and not accepting them as they are.
Yeah, trying to make them permanent, for example. This is good. I want this don't want this to change.
Something else occurred to me when I was looking at it, and it was actually, I think it referred back to I think Viranaga and Adam, when they were talking last week, mentioned it. this idea that our ability to behave in a particular way or to behave in a more skillful way sort of follows our intellectual understanding. And I was thinking when we were going through here, I think particularly when it's looking about being upright and about it's a difficult thing to be, isn't it? To actually really represent what's going on inside, and to be able to clearly express that, outwardly. And you can, I think, as you become more confident in yourself and in what you're doing and what you're thinking, then that becomes more easy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But whereas if you just try to say something, if you try to force it, it doesn't have any integrity in it, and somehow you need to rationally believe it, and then your emotions sort of catch up, and you're able to actually follow it through, and it comes across to the person you're communicating with as genuine. Whereas it's quite easily, if it's not got the full weight of your rationality and your emotion, then it falls flat a bit.
Well, I guess that's the aspect of training in Buddhism, that we don't force things. We need the support of our spiritual friends and people we understand are wise. And that's a big question. Who is wise in our experience? And how can we find friends that we can trust that are wise, or teachers that are truly wise? And I know in my experience, I have a good friend, and I know the way she responds. I know, oh gosh, yeah, I think I really value her wisdom, and I can just tell just by a silent response that she's finding what I'm saying is unskillful. and it's quite subtle, but then it brings me back into a much more objective perspective. So it can be so valuable having that in friendship. And
you were talking earlier about sort of raising the bar,
yeah.
and that's you're the people you respect raise your bar, don't they? Because
yes.
you're more alert to your own what's going on in your own mind.
That's right.
And that's really, and it's tiring actually, isn't it, sometimes? I don't know about you, but I often find when I'm with someone I really respect that I'm sort of trying to up my game.
Yes, it's stretching.
You're stretching,
it's
yeah.
Stretching.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it throws us back on ourselves. It's a bit like a mirror, and that's what we can helpfully do for each other. But yeah, it is training, like a training in exercise. It can be a bit tiring,
yeah.
But it's also inspiring, and I just find the words of the sutra very beautiful. The qualities are very beautiful, and that whole thing about easily supported is such an interesting area to unpack as well.
It's a big subject, isn't it?
It's a huge subject, and it's a huge. It kind of brings in different approaches, even in Buddhism, to work and practice, and views in ancient India that you couldn't be spiritual and work.
Yeah.
And I think I've had that view a bit, and yet other traditions subsequently have made that a very rich part of practice, like the Zen tradition, Tibetan tradition, and now in modern Buddhism, in our movement we have Buddhist businesses where we work together as practice, and I've done that, and I just find that very, very rich. We don't have a society that will support people to do nothing, well, work-wise, in terms of, you're doing a lot by practicing spiritually, but we don't have a society that supports that the way it did in India, ancient India.
So you find yourself, I think in terms of coming back to the sort of contentment thing, and the, so if I need to work to provide whatever I think I need, but what do I really need? And I probably think I need a lot more than I actually do need.
Yeah.
So when I worked very hard to accumulate things. And it had a cost, because it meant that a lot of my energy was spent thinking about things which were actually not spiritual at all, to acquire things which I didn't really need. And it's very difficult to let go of that. It's very difficult to let go of that thing, that idea that you need stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
And again, maybe you can see by other people's example that perhaps you can let go of a few things.
Yeah.
Great. So I hope you enjoyed that Dharma Night talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a class, a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving, you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that. And that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.